The opening sequence is a bunch of racists about to hang a white man for fighting against segregation. This is based on a true story. It's 1961 in Montgomery, Alabama. Senior Bob Zellner from a Methodist college celebrates with his girl Carol. Afterwards, they do the hanky-panky at a gazebo. The next day, Bob informs Professor Kleiner that he wants to go to a civic group in town because he wants to audit one of their meetings and meet Rosa Parks. Despite Kleiner advising him against meeting with black people, the five boys introduce themselves to Reverend Ralph Abernathy and Rosa Parks. Bob is assigned to do a thesis on race relations with his friends, Townsend Ellis, John Hill, Joe Thomas, and William Head. Bob asks Abernathy and Rosa if they can interview them about the Montgomery Improvement Association, and they both agree. When John asks if they can come to the celebration at their church, Rosa warns them that they may get arrested for doing so. When Bob assures them that they're not going to cause a ruckus, Abernathy realizes that they don't fully understand the shit they finna get into. At the 5th anniversary of the Montgomery bus boycott, the five boys are warned that the Popo are there to arrest they Oz. And Bob is dumbfounded because he white and privileged, but they say whites will be arrested for attending a black church. When the police arrive, Abernathy and Parks help them evade arrest by leading them to the church's back door. Rosa tells Bob that someday he'll need to decide which side he is on, and not choosing is a choice. The next day during his boxing session, his coach has heard of Bob's research and he punches him out of nowhere. The fat, pot-bellied racist gets his Oz handed to him though. The church incident soon hits the newspapers. Alabama's Attorney General summons the five boys. The living jump scare wants them to leave college immediately even though graduation is just around the corner, or else they will get charged with a crime. Bob says they haven't committed any crimes and reminds him that two members of the group, he and John, have achieved the highest scholastic honors. After seeing a burning cross on the yard outside his room, Bob joins Kleiner and his friends at the campus gate, where they face the Klansmen, who are eager to get all five of them. Bob is shocked to see his decrepit old grandfather there, looking like Joe Biden. J.O. tells him that the Klan called him down from Birmingham. The crypt keeper warns Bob that some members want to harm him, but J.O. stopped them. When Bob's Methodist minister dad, James, arrives, J.O. blames him for not teaching Bob what's right. James then responds that it's not a crime to go to church regardless of color. Despite James's support for all of them, the four boys don't stand on business. They are afraid of the Klansmen and want to go home. Townsend, who blames Bob for ruining their lives, tells Bob, who has remained calm, that he doesn't have Rosa's commitment because he has options. After the four boys leave, Bob visits Virginia and Clifford Durr with his fiancée, Carol Ann. At dinner with the Durrs, Rosa, Aubrey Williams, and Aubrey's assistant, Derek Ang, Carol Ann informs them that Bob was stripped of his right to give the commencement speech. They encourage Bob to join them as they need someone like him to speak to other white students throughout the South. But Carol Ann says that ending up in jail is not in their plans. Derek calls Bob out for playing safe. Discussing what happened over dinner, Carol Ann expresses her annoyance about them wanting to decide their fate. Bob shares with her that when he was a kid, he was threatened by older mayonnaise boys to hit blacks while in a running car. So he did, and the boy ended up breaking his arm. Consumed with guilt, Bob helped the guy with his groceries. When Bob sees on TV that the civil rights activists, Freedom Riders, are going to Montgomery despite a bus getting burned in Anniston, he tells Virginia that it isn't safe. Virginia assures him that they've set up as much protection as possible and encourages him to volunteer. Later, when Bob asks Derek why he's in Montgomery when he's from New York, Derek shares with Bob that he's a fourth-generation American and his family was brought over there as labor. When he was a kid during the war, his parents made him wear a sign that said, "I am Chinese," so he wouldn't get arrested for being Japanese. He says it was messed up that he felt glad that he wasn't Japanese. Okay, but Derek kind of fine. He Japanese, I'll get on my knees. When the Freedom Riders, escorted by Alabama State Troopers, led by Floyd Mann, arrive at the bus depot, they are attacked by the locals, who have been urged to arm themselves because of the activists. Seeing the chaos, Virginia asks Bob to get Esquire magazine press Jessica Mitford to safety. Bob tells her that he'll only help them once before going out to save Jessica and two other girls, Joanne and Susan. "Oh, you better get your mans, Joanne." Meanwhile, Floyd gives a warning shot, making everyone freeze and stop fighting. Despite the violence, the injured activists are determined to continue the freedom ride to New Orleans. While black folks are having a meeting inside the First Baptist Church, an angry white mob waits for them outside. Abernathy advises everyone to stay where they are and informs them that U.S. Attorney General Robert Kennedy has assured them that the National Guard is coming to protect them. He adds that despite the violence they've received, they must remain nonviolent and hold the moral high ground to transform America into a better place. At night, Joanne tells Bob about her struggles. She strangely pours water on his head because she wants to smell his white man's BO. She kind of likes it. but Carol Pastrami blocks her getting all jelly. Derek informs Bob, Joanne, and Susan that the injured activists and volunteers in place of the others will be taking the bus down to Jackson, Mississippi later that day. After learning that Derek is one of the volunteers, Bob packs up to join them, but the authorities don't allow him to get on the bus, which pleases Carol Ann, who is against it. Later, while watching the update on the Freedom Riders on TV, Bob points at Freedom Rider John Lewis and tells Carol Ann that he's the first real man of God he's ever met. He says that he felt scared to ride the bus and felt relieved that he wasn't allowed to ride it. He shares that when he was unharmed while rescuing activists during the riot 2 days ago because he pasty. When he says he wants to reach out and understand their cause despite her disapproval, she gets upset that he's willing to jeopardize his ambition and the life they've planned together for Black people. She slaps him, and they eventually break up. Yeah, F that hoe. Bob calls the office of a freedom organization, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and volunteers for the summer. Bob's family prays for Bob's safety in fighting for freedom and justice, and keeps Bob's decision a secret from J.O. Bob gets called an N-lover, and J.O. almost catches on. After graduation, Bob drives to the SNCC office in Atlanta, Georgia, and the guy assigned there, Chuck McDew, is surprised to learn that he's white. Before McDew leaves, he gives Bob the keys to the office and instructs him to be in the office from 8 a.m. to 5:30 p.m., answer phone calls, and guard the black briefcase, which contains everything about the organization. Days later, someone sees Bob leaving the office and starts tailing him. Joanne calls the SNCC office and immediately drives there, upon realizing that Bob is the one on the phone. The person tailing Bob then sees them together. J.O. is informed about it, so he visits the SNCC office, and at the nearby park, he says he saw Bob fraternizing with Black people. J.O. says he may be part of the KKK, but isn't against Black people. He's just full of white pride and white men's semen. J.O. says he don't want to eat with them or see them. We feel the same about Yo Ugly Oz. Bob tells him that he works for the SNCC, an organization that hopes to demolish segregation, and that the people behind the movement are unstoppable. J.O. warns him that he'll shoot him in the head if he goes to Birmingham to protest. When Joanne approaches them, J.O. refuses to shake her hand, prompting Bob to leave with Joanne. Joanne, a baddie. Herbert Lee from Macomb, Mississippi, calls SNCC looking for Bob Moses, who is helping them with voting registration. He says Moses is supposed to be back the week before, but he hasn't heard a thing from him. Bob tells him that he doesn't know where Moses is and a lot of people are looking for him. A man named Jim Foreman arrives in the office, and Jim begins a recorded interview with Bob, who narrates his earliest memory of racism, when a white lady calls him out at 4 years old after catching him using a water fountain for Black people, and that Bob should be using the sour cream fountain. Bob also narrates how, while working at a general store, he was expected to entertain white folks first, and he wasn't allowed to help Black folks, no matter how heavy their groceries were or how old they were. When asked why he's helping the cause instead of terrorizing, Bob says his dad James left the Klan after traveling together with a Black choir, and he couldn't get enough of seasoned food after that. Bob tells Jim that he hopes he can be a liaison to college students and talk to them about the cause. Shortly after, a guy named Reggie puts coffee in Bob's pocket and makes it known that he doesn't trust Bob, as he thinks the Klan is using him to infiltrate them. Soon, Bob watches Reggie and Joanne conduct a nonviolent training for others. They try to provoke him, and he's supposed to not react, but he fails. Later that night, Joanne and Bob realize how to make Oreo cookies, the cream-filled kind. Reggie disapproves of their relationship, but only because he's jealous. Then Reggie informs Joanne and Bob that Herbert was gunned down by his white neighbor, State Legislator Hurst. Hurst thinks Herbert is an ingrate for registering to vote after he loaned him money to buy his place. The absolute caucasity of this white wrinkly bitch. Bob, Joanne, and Reggie drive to Macomb, where they have a meeting with Moses, McDew, and half a dozen SNCC staff. Despite his fear, Bob joins a protest march alongside Joanne and others. Doc, his former classmate and friend who's driving by, sees him and calls him out for being a traitor. When they arrive at the county courthouse, the authorities start arresting protesters, and Bob receives beatings from white folks. The Macomb sheriff refuses to arrest Bob, who is then taken to Doc, who has organized a lynching. One of the guys think Bob is a communist and wants him to speak Communese. De Fook? When the men who delivered Bob learn about Bob's background, that he's a son to a minister, they tell Doc they're out, and Bob tells them that it'll be justice for everybody they've killed when they receive the chair for killing him. Although Doc initially assures them that nothing will happen to them, he lets Bob go, fearing the consequences. The next day, Joanne and Bob learn that the New York paper named Bob as the one who led the first civil rights march in Mississippi. This article upsets Bob since it's not true, and he apologizes to Joanne, who says they really shouldn't believe everything they read. Meanwhile, the Durs are shocked upon reading the article. Since Bob plans on skipping town and continuing his studies up north, Joanna and Reggie drive him to the bus stop. While waiting for the bus, Doc arrives and pulls out a gun, threatening to harm Bob if he returns. Despite Joanna asking him to let it go, Bob violently confronts Doc, even pointing the gun at his head. Bob warns him not to provoke him, as he's just trying to tame the monster in him that wants to beat him up until he's unrecognizable. He says he wants to be a better man and be kinder and gentler like Joanne. When his bus arrives, instead of leaving, Bob makes it clear to Doc that he will retaliate if he messes with him again. Bob changes his mind and commits to the civil rights movement. Bob later becomes the SNCC's first white field secretary and one of the organizers of the 1964 Mississippi Freedom Summer Project. He organizes on college campuses, takes part in voter registration campaigns, and gets involved in the integration of public facilities. Despite getting arrested and jailed 17 times over the next 5 years, Bob continued to be politically active. What did you guys think of this one?
Subscribe to watch more videos like this. Turn on notifications. And leave a like, it really helps the channel out. Thank you for watching.